11,600 years ago, on a ridge in what is now southeastern Turkey, someone quarried a pillar of stone taller than a man, carved a snarling fox into its surface, and raised it upright into a ring of others just like it. They had no metal tools, no wheel, no pottery, no writing. They had not yet invented farming. And what they left behind is the oldest monument of its kind anywhere on Earth. This is Göbekli Tepe. It is 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid, 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. By every rule we thought we knew about human history, it should not exist. And for most of a century, we walked right over it. In 1963, a survey team from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University walked this hill. They saw broken slabs of limestone poking through the soil and a scatter of worked flint. Their conclusion? An abandoned medieval cemetery. Nothing worth excavating. They were wrong by about 10,000 years. The hill is called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill in Turkish, about 15 kilometers from the city of Urfa. For 3 decades, the survey's verdict stood, and the hill kept its secret. Then, in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt reread that old survey report. Where others had seen medieval rubble, he recognized something else entirely. The broken slabs were not gravestones, and the flint was Stone Age. He later said the hill left him 2 choices: walk away or spend the rest of his life there. He chose the hill. Schmidt began digging in 1995. Almost at once, his team struck stone, not rubble, but a carved T-shaped pillar, deliberately shaped and standing exactly where it had been placed. Then another, and another, set in a great ring. The pillars were alive with animals: foxes, boars, snakes, scorpions, vultures, cranes, wild birds. Carved in relief, by hand, into hard limestone, by people whose only tools were sharper stone. And then the radiocarbon dates came back. The oldest enclosures were built around 9,600 years before Christ, 11,500 years ago. Put that in scale. The distance between you and the Roman Empire is about 2,000 years. The distance between the Romans and the builders of Göbekli Tepe is more than 9,000 years on top of that. This hill was already ancient before the first brick of the first city was ever laid. Here is what makes that date so unsettling. 11,500 years ago, nobody on Earth farmed. Nobody kept herds. Nobody lived in a city, because cities would not exist for another 6,000 years. Every single human alive was a hunter-gatherer. And we know the builders here were hunter-gatherers because of what they left in the dirt. The animal bones are overwhelmingly wild: gazelle, aurochs, wild boar, wild birds. In the oldest layers, there are no domesticated animals and no farmed grain. These were foragers living off the land. Now, the textbook story of civilization has always run in one direction. First, people learn to farm. Then, the surplus lets them settle into villages. Then, with full bellies and spare time, they finally organize the labor to raise temples and monuments. Farming first, monuments last. Göbekli Tepe runs that entire story backwards. Because building these rings wasn't a casual project. It took hundreds of people, quarrying, hauling, carving, and raising 10-ton stones over years. Those people had to be organized, directed, and above all, fed. By every rule we taught for a century, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers were too few, too mobile, and too loosely bound to pull off anything on this scale. And yet, here it stands. The monument came first, before the farm, before the village, before almost everything we assumed had to come first. So how do you build this with nothing but stone, bone, fiber, and muscle? Start with the pillars. The largest standing stones here rise around 5.5 meters, taller than 2 men, and weigh up to 10 tons. Everyone was cut from a limestone plateau just a few hundred meters from where it stands. We know how, because they left one behind. In the bedrock quarry lies an unfinished pillar, abandoned mid-cut, close to 7 meters long, an estimated 50 tons of stone. You can still see the grooves where workers chipped around it with flint picks, slowly freeing it from the living rock. Then it cracked, and they walked away, leaving us the blueprint. Then came the part that still defies easy explanation, moving 10 tons of stone without wheels and without a single draft animal, both still thousands of years in the future. The likeliest answer is the oldest technology of all: ropes of twisted plant fiber, wooden sledges and levers, and a very large number of people pulling in time. At the site, each pillar was raised into a shallow socket cut into the bedrock, then braced by dry stone walls built up around it in a ring. And at the heart of every enclosure stand 2 larger pillars, taller than the rest, facing one another, the focus of everything around them. And those central pillars are not abstract shapes. Look closely at the best preserved ring, the one archaeologists call Enclosure D. And the T-stones become bodies. Arms run down their sides, hands reach around the front, fingers almost touching over a curved belt and a fox pelt loincloth. The T is a head. These are towering, faceless beings, perhaps ancestors, perhaps gods, standing guard in stone. Around them, the animals are not decoration. The same creatures repeat across the site, and they are mostly dangerous ones: snakes, scorpions, vultures, big cats. One famous slab in Enclosure D, nicknamed the Vulture Stone, shows a great bird beside a scorpion and a headless human figure. We cannot read it, but it was clearly meant to say something, a language of images carved 11,000 years before anyone would invent writing to replace it. And here is the part that should keep you up at night. Ground-penetrating radar suggests as many as 20 of these enclosures still lie buried beneath the hill. After nearly 30 years of careful digging, we have uncovered less than 1/10 of Göbekli Tepe. The rest is still down there, waiting. Which brings us to the deepest mystery of all, and it is not how it was built, or by whom. It is what they did to it in the end. Because at some point, around 8,000 years before Christ, the great rings were filled in, packed with rubble, bone, and earth. Buried. Klaus Schmidt believed this burial was deliberate, that the builders themselves entombed their monument under tons of fill, which is the very reason it survived so astonishingly intact. Other researchers now argue the fill may have built up more gradually through erosion, collapse, and later activity. The honest answer is that we still don't fully agree on why it was sealed. Only that it was, and that the burial saved it. And the larger question, what was it for, is just as open. For years, the leading idea was that no one actually lived here, that with few clear houses and few household hearths in the oldest layers, this was not a village at all, but a sanctuary. A gathering place where scattered bands met for ritual, for feasting, and perhaps to honor their dead. The feasting, at least, is real. The sheer quantity of wild animal bone points to enormous gatherings. Hundreds of people, drawn from far away, fed all at once. Though in recent years, the picture has grown more complicated. Newer work by the current research team has found cisterns cut for water and hints of everyday activity. The line between temple and settlement is blurrier than we first thought. But it is that act of gathering that may hold the most important clue of all. Schmidt proposed something genuinely radical, that the need to feed these huge, repeated gatherings, year after year, to build and to worship, may have pushed these very people toward growing grain on purpose for the first time. Not first the farm, then the temple. But perhaps the temple came first, and the hunger it created helped invent the farm. It remains a hypothesis, still fiercely debated, but here is the haunting detail. Genetic studies trace the world's first domesticated wheat to a mountain range you can see from this very hill, at almost exactly this moment in time. Whatever truly drove them, the people of Gobekli Tepe did something we long insisted was impossible. Before the wheel, before metal, before the first written word, they bound themselves together around an idea powerful enough to move mountains of stone. And that forces a humbling thought. The capacity for grand cooperation, for shared belief on a massive scale, may not have arrived late as a reward for civilization. It may have been there at the very start. It may be part of what built civilization in the first place. And Gobekli Tepe was not even alone. Across the surrounding hills, archaeologists are now uncovering sister sites, places like Karahan Tepe, part of a whole forgotten world of stone, a culture of monument builders we never knew was there. Klaus Schmidt died in 2014 with more than 90% of his hill still buried beneath his feet. He never stopped insisting the answers were still down there, waiting for someone patient enough to find them. We can date these stones. We can map them, weigh them, and trace the tools that shaped them. But we cannot ask the people who raised them a single question. And so, an 11,500-year-old hill in Turkey does what only the deepest mysteries can. It tells us, with total certainty, just how little we really know about where we came from. Gobekli Tepe, the temple that came before everything. A question carved in stone, buried for 11,000 years, waiting for us to finally dig it up and discover that we still cannot answer it.